Greetings. My name is Al Batinga with CCS Learning Academy. And what we want to talk about is one of my favorite topics. It's change management. And so we're going to give you a 10,000-foot view. We'll talk about some of the class concepts. We'll talk about some of the important concepts. We'll talk about how the class usually flows. And we'll even talk about different formats for this. So we're going to jump in, give you a 10,000-foot view, and we hope you join us for our next change management class. And what we're doing is we're calling it big changes in a short course, right? We're always looking for that. How can we get more done in a shorter period of time? So this class is as short as 3 hours for the line. If you're part of the change, we can get it down to 3 hours. We'll explain who, what, when, where, why, and how. And we'll talk about a lot of things that we'll have a lot of dialogue. Our classes are very interactive. Lots of questions, lots of examples, lots of dialogue in between. And even sometimes we have some professional arguments about certain things and dialogue, but it's very important, especially on a topic like this, a big topic like this, to have very deep discussions. And so my name is Al Batinga, as I mentioned, and Deanna Mendigo and I team teach most of these classes. And so let's talk about topics here. So first and foremost, we'll talk about what is change, right? I mean, we know what change is, but let's talk about it from a group change. All of us as individuals change on a regular basis, right? Hopefully as often as we need and want. But when you're doing an enterprise change, in other words, an organizational change, it's a little bit different because we have to make sure everybody's on the same page. So we have a discussion on what is change. And then we have to answer this universal question. Why do we need to change, and what's in it for me? Right? All of us attending this workshop or even thinking about this all want to know what's in it for me. I'm going to have to sacrifice. I'm going to have to make changes. I'm going to have to go out of my way. What am I going to gain from this? And I know the big picture stuff is important, but we also want to talk about detail. What is it in for? What is in it for me, for you, for everybody here? Because there always is. You don't do wholesale changes without it benefiting everybody. And so the idea, though, is to communicate it, to ensure that people internalize it, understand it, and from a self-interest perspective can buy into it. And we also talk about traits and tools we need to affect change, to make this change initiative work at the highest levels, right? And so let's talk about the concept of traits, then let's talk about tools. So traits are things like patience. In order to affect change at the level we want, we need to have patience. Now, on the flip side of that, we also have to have this concept of sense of urgency. And I know those two fight, right? Those, like, it's patience over here and sense of urgency over here, they can fight. But there are moments and there are reasonings and there are times for both. Another big concept there is we have to communicate. And so there's a bunch of traits that all of us have to continue growing to affect a great change, right? A needed change. And that's the idea of change management. And let's talk about tools. Well, I'll give you an easy tool, and that's a weekly meeting that's very clear, that's documented. If I missed a meeting, I can go to the documentation to see what's going on. One of the things I recommend initially in change is to actually meet daily, because I can tell you most of these change initiatives are so big and so global that it's very easy to get off track if we're not communicating at level 10 out of 10. And so that's a tool. It could be a weekly meeting, a daily meeting, an email that goes out, an area where we put a SharePoint or a common drive where we keep our notes and everybody has access to it so they can refer and so they can understand all of that, right? And so those are the traits and those are the types of tools from a small sampling concept that we will continue to develop in class. And what stops us? What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the challenges that stops us from effectively changing the goals and objectives? What stops us from meeting our goals and objectives as we initiate and move forward a change process. And so what it looks like is, most of you who understand projects, you'll get the aha moments. It's beginning, end, milestones, right? And when you have a good change initiative, you have a project plan with all the bells and whistles on how we're going to do this, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who's doing what? How are we doing it? How are we executing? What are some of the contingencies that we need? What is the scope? What is in scope? What is out scope? What are the resources that we have? What's the budget we have to do all of this in? So it can get very complex. There's a lot of moving parts in a change initiative. And that's why we want to come alongside you and help and support your efforts. And then we want to come up with the best practices, right? It's very important to have best practices. We want to utilize practices that have been proven, have been utilized. And it's a little bit different for every single change initiative, and absolutely for every company, because you have different cultures and the way you do things and the like. And so it's fine tuning it there. And so best practices for change management is critically important. And so here, what we're talking about here for just a moment is defining your strategy. We have to have a strategy to go from here to here, right? And so what's the current situation? What's the culture like? How are we on time? How are we on resources? When we initiate this change management, are people going to have enough bandwidth, enough time, enough resources to not only execute their own job, but to do the necessary concepts to change, right? Because you may have training involved there. You might have some coaching, some mentoring. You might have some group work that you need to do, right? So we have to plan all of that out. And the most important part of a change is the people aspect of this, right? The people aspect of this. We're going to have technology changes in our change management concept, right? But the most important concept are the people. How do we initiate this? Have we communicated fruitfully for them? Have we involved them, right? There's some big questions that we need to answer there. And then last part of this is, what are the issues that we need to analyze? Maybe it's the budget. Maybe there's some legal issues that we have to really look at. Maybe we have to look at competitive issues since we're making wholesale changes. Maybe we have to look at alternatives for some of the things that we do at this current time. So there's a bunch of things that you can work through and work on from that perspective, right? And then the next part of this is, we're going to have, depending on how big the change is and how big the team is, generally speaking, you will have a core team of change agents. And these are people leading the way. These are people who are supporting the efforts from the front. They're laying the example out. They're communicating. And so if you look at these 6 C's here, they have commitment to see the change through. They have commitment to be at the forefront. They're going to contribute at the highest levels, right? They're going to over-communicate. In change initiatives, you want to over-communicate, especially in the beginning. And then we want to all cooperate. We want to take that level up to cooperation, from cooperation to collaboration, right? Collaboration is the highest form of working together. So you got teamwork, you got working together, and then you have this concept of collaboration where we're seamlessly, hopefully, working together. In all of these change initiatives, you're going to think of a different way that you'd like to execute, and somebody else is going to think of a different way, and I may think of a different way. So we have to walk through the conflicts to ensure that we come up with the best way to do this. And we also want to come out of this connected. So whenever you work on an initiative where it is so deep, wide, and tall, right, we want to ensure that we get things out of this. And you will, by the way, because you're working hand in hand with other people, your colleagues, maybe your manager, maybe even your manager's manager, to implement some of these changes to get through, to ensure that we meet and exceed our goals and objectives. So there's a connection there that can be developed. And so as a wrap up here, so big changes in a short course, right? And so we can go from 3 hours for the line all the way to multi-day for the actual people who are implementing this, right? It is very complex, and it is like a project, which means that in a different scenario, the project will change, right? For one company, they might have it lined up. You can't take that program, put another company because there's too many nuances, too many differences as we go along. So we look forward to working with you and allowing you and giving you the base to work from a change management perspective. We'll educate, train, and coach and support you in whatever ways we can to make sure, or at least to give you better odds on success, right? There's a lot of factors in here that we will discuss in class, and we want to encourage you to come join us. I've been through many change initiatives, many change initiatives, from not only from a staffing perspective, but from a leadership perspective and everywhere in between. So come join us. We look forward to working with you to implement and institute big changes in a short course. Have a great day.